Hello, and thank you for joining us this morning or today, depending on what part of the country you're located in. You are logged into the joint CMLS, the Council of Multiple Listing Service, and REZO, Real Estate Standards Organization webinar, preparing for the data dictionary now and in the future. We do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to both the CMLS and REZO websites. And we will be sending all attendees a link to the recording. My name is Danae Evans. I'm the CEO of CMLS. CMLS is the National Association for MLSs, and we are working hard to bring you important industry information and keep you educated on all things MLS. If you're not already a member, I would encourage you to visit our website at cmls.org and look into joining and finding out the benefits that we offer. I also want to let you know, in case you haven't heard, we do have our upcoming CMLS conference this October 7th through the 9th in Kansas City. It will be hosted by Heartland MLS. Very excited to share with that. We're working on an amazing agenda that should be posted very, very soon, today or tomorrow, with some great speakers from outside our industry, focusing on leadership, technology, and the future of real estate. We're also going to follow that up with some industry-specific discussions and how it applies to your local MLS. So, today's purpose. Most of you know MLS is owned and operated by realtor associations, need to be data dictionary compliant by the end of the year. So today's topic is preparing for the data dictionary now and in the future. Today's intended audience is for MLS data experts and technologists, but we're happy to have anyone join us today. All of it good information. CMLS adopted data dictionary certification as one of our key initiatives for 2015 with the goal of helping all of our CMLS members certify by the end of the year. And we decided the best way to do that was partner with REZO, Real Estate Standards Organization, to help get the information out about data dictionary and supply the proper resources and support. We really want to help let you know what it is, so data dictionary, what it is, what are the benefits, and how to go about it. Today's webinar is the second of 3 webinars to help you get the information you need for successful certification. You can find the link for the first webinar on CMLS or REZO's website. And in that webinar, we discussed the purpose and benefits of implementing data dictionary. So a little bit higher level and less technical details, so more of the benefits of it and the purpose. But today's call, we're going to get into the specifics of preparing for data dictionary and what I affectionately refer to as a little geek speak. So we'll get a little bit into the weeds. Panelists are going to cover data dictionary 1.3, how to prepare for the new versions, and then also begin preparing for your bond certification. And one thing I would say, go ahead and take your very first note from the webinar, but your vendor is not going to just take care of this for you. I've heard this several times. Jeremy and I talk about this, but you do have to apply yourself. You have to apply for your specific MLS certification. So you'll work in partnership with your vendor, but you do still have to submit your own certification application, and they're going to go through that process today and a brief overview of it. You'll definitely want to talk with your vendor, also your technology partners, and finding out that they're getting ready for data dictionary. We do have our last webinar scheduled. It is next month. So if you can put it on your calendars, it's September 9th at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, and that's understanding the data dictionary certification. So again, same type of audience, data dictionary, our data experts and technologists, and really start to dig into the process and how to fill out the application and the testing. So we want to let you know we're going to have a question and answer session at the end, but please type your questions into the chat box during the course of the webinar. So we'll address them at the end, and we are slotted for 1 hour today, but we do have available a little extra time, so 1.5 hours. So if our questions are still coming in, we're having some good discussion, we'll end the webinar, we'll stop the recording, but we will continue to answer anyone's questions. So with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Jeremy Crawford. He is the Executive Director of REZO. Jeremy is just hitting on, I think I did the math, and we're about 4 months Previously, he was the COO at MLS Listings in California. And I am going to let Jeremy introduce you to our panelists, Mr. Rob Larson and Gregory Lemon. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. And Jeremy, it is all you.
Thank you so much, Danae, and thank you for all the attendees today. I know from the attendance aspect we have about 50% of you did attend the first webinar in the three-part series, and some of you are new to the webinar, and so we will do a slight overlap of the introduction, so if those of you that have already seen it would just bear with us. And we will then get in, as Danae said, into the meat of what the data dictionary is. We want to help you understand what is actually the purpose of the data dictionary and technically what that is and what it is today and how it's going to grow in the future, how it's going to affect your local markets, and what you need to do internally with your organization to adopt the data dictionary today and certify against that, as well as continue to grow your implementation of the data dictionary standard. With us today we have Greg Lemon. Greg Lemon is with RISO. He is our certification and compliance expert, and he deals with the aspects of the data dictionary as well as our other standards and how that applies to certification for MLSs, or if that may be applicable to vendors, because we certify vendors as well on some of our other standards. And also with us we have Rob Larson. Rob Larson is the Chief Information Officer of CRMLS, which is the largest MLS in the nation, and he is also the work group chair of the data dictionary. So I want to thank Greg and Rob, both of you, for spending time today with us, with all of the attendees, to talk about the data dictionary. So just to brief over the agenda for today, the first thing is I'm going to reiterate what the standards are and how RISO comes into play, and then with creating the work product, which is the standards, and then understanding the data dictionary current versions, which is 1.3 and 1.4, and what the data dictionary actually is and what the benefits are of that. And then take a look at the certification levels. Greg will talk about briefly certification levels and how that applies today as well as in the future for the data dictionary to increase adoption over the next 5 years. And then as we grow the data dictionary by bringing in market-specific information from the local markets that are not contained in the earlier versions of the data dictionary, how you can specifically shape the data dictionary into the next version, which is 1.5 and beyond, as we want to continue to grow this standard for the good of the industry. And we do want to open it up for questions and answers and have at least 15 to 20 minutes within the hour session for Q&A. And again, we're willing to stay on for the next 30 minutes to answer as many questions as you might have, and we'll make sure to provide contact information at the end of the slide. So if you have questions after the fact, please feel free to contact us with those. So the next thing I wanted to show you just briefly, and this is a repeat couple of slides for the other the attendees that contain the first webinar, is that this is a slide of world without standards, and this is my analogy of the pain points that exist in the world because of the lack of standards implementation. And so what I'm showing first and foremost is just a couple of slides of what happens on a train ride across the Asia and European continents. And essentially the reason that you see these slides here is to show the lack of standards and the inefficiencies of not having standards. There is a worldwide standard of train tracks, and with that, many people have trains that can go across countries. But in Mongolia, they do not create or modify their train tracks with the worldwide standards. So as you travel across continents and across countries, you'll be sitting on a passenger train, and they will have to take the train apart and actually change what they call the bogies, which is the wheels of the train that sits on the tracks, because countries such as Mongolia does not apply to a standard, if you will. And so in doing so, you as a passenger have to sit there for 3 to 6 hours while a huge staff changes out every time they cross the border the train tracks. And if you can think about the lack of innovation here, all of these workers could be spending their time engineering super trains and new innovations on the trains, but instead they're spending an enormous amount of time day in and day out changing the buggies on the trains because of the lack of standards in certain countries as this applies. And you as a passenger sit there and you waste 3 to 6 hours of your time just across the border on a train. So as we would equate this back into the real estate world, we see the real estate data coming from the MLSs in a similar fashion that is today somewhat efficient but needs a great level of improvement. And in doing so, we want to create standards that is increasing innovation and interoperability. We want to make sure that everyone in the industry that we serve today, primarily the agents and the brokers who are the participant and subscriber customers of the MLS, can take advantage of the efficiencies throughout the real estate transaction life cycle and the underlying technology products that they need to do that with their consumers through standards that provides the level of innovation and interoperability. And essentially this will make happier agents, brokers, and consumers as everyone is on the same page and they can focus on moving forward and being progressive as opposed to being inefficient and dealing with maintenance aspects overall. So for the Real Estate Standards Organization, we're here to serve that purpose for you, and we're here to work as a nonprofit member-based organization that encompasses membership from the agent community, the brokerage community, the association community, the MLS community, as well as the technology vendor community. And we are a nonprofit organization that's here for the good of all of those that we perceive as our customers, and we take volunteer efforts from each of those members that belong to REZO and try to make a work product, which are our technical data standards. The standards that REZO creates are free and they're open to the public. They are open source, and the manner in which we work are work groups and committees, much like you have committees of volunteers in your own local MLS for compliance, rules and regulations, political action funds, etc. REZO is formed the same, that we rely on our volunteers, such as Rob Larson, who's a volunteer chair for the Data Dictionary Work Group. And our vision and mission is extremely clear. We want to create a streamlined real estate technology industry, and we want to create and promote the adoption of standards that is driving the efficiency throughout the industry. We really want to try to find a benefit for all the constituents that are in the real estate industry and however they may touch on the transactions. And so if you can think about the data itself and the delivery of the data, which are two work products that REZO defines today, is how the data is defined, which Rob will discuss that more in depth, as well as how to deliver the data, which was REZO's first standard implemented over 15 years ago, is this is how we want to shape the future of the industry. We do not want a cumbersome environment that's very inefficient with heavy overhead in delivering data from an MLS out to the broker's choice destination for a website, a broker back office system, statistical products, etc. So if you can imagine in the near and the far future, we are going to have a bullet train of data so that everyone can benefit and work on innovation and technology streamlines for the good of everyone in the industry. And so that's where we are today. And our efforts were first, again, transport, and we do make transport standards, but our biggest effort over the past few years is the data dictionary. And the data dictionary is set to define how that data looks like as it sits on the train, if you will, of transportation. So at this time, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Rob Larson, who's going to provide much deeper insight in the data dictionary, how it exists today, what it looks like, and actually give you some displays of that and how it's going to grow in the near future. So Rob Larson, it is off to you.
I think we're having a little trouble with Rob's connection.
Okay.
Do you maybe want to take this, and I will see what I can do to help get that solved, Jeremy?
You bet. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I will speak on Rob's behalf, and hopefully he'll be able to get connected here shortly. So let me dive in with understanding the data dictionary overall, and then the versions that we have today here on the current slide. So the data dictionary is set up to try to help define the common terms that you see in the industry in a similar manner. Today, agents use listing input sheets, and they use those to enter their listings, and most of the time they do those now in an online manner, if you will. And so when they go in to set up a listing, they're selecting items such as the type of property it is, residential, the style of the property, townhome, the features that it might have, such as granite countertops in the kitchen, or patio or lanai out on the back. And so what Rezo is doing with the data dictionary is the data dictionary is the Rosetta Stone of the industry. Today there are 770 roughly MLSs, and they all speak a slightly different language. And if anyone's familiar with language translation, unfortunately languages do not always translate equally. So the standards of the data dictionary are to try to combine everything into a common language, and we have termed this the Rosetta Stone of the industry, if you will. And so the data dictionary is set up to define the fields that all the MLSs use across the nation and define those in a similar manner. So as you send data out from your MLS to a broker, and the broker has to collect that data from multiple market areas, they can do so in a standardized format, which allows accuracy of the data as well as efficiencies of aggregating that data, because they do not need to map different types of fields into sometimes a non-translatable format, and it's very inefficient to do so. With the data dictionary, we are currently, as I mentioned before, on versions 1.3 and 1.4. And with versions 1.3, there are roughly 166 core fields that have been defined across the nation. And with version 1.4, we are growing not only the fields that are defined within the data dictionary, but adding those pick list values that we call enumerations, a technical term, but for the purpose of many attendees, this is where an agent simply selects one or more fields in a or one or more criteria in a field, such as interior features, so they can list 10, 15, 20 interior features within their listing. And those within the data dictionary are termed enumerations, but we often call those pick list values because the agents are picking those from a list in their local MLS system. And so the first thing I'd like to show you to give you a screenshot of that is the actual spreadsheet of the data dictionary, so you can see an example of that. So Greg is going to pull this up, and Greg, if you will go ahead and go over to the property tab, then I can show you here. So these are some of the standard names that you all deal with every day inside of the MLS, and these are the ones that we are working to define that can be common across the industry. So listing ID, for example, typically you can see in the column E, there's a synonym of MLS number, ML number, listing number. So at many MLSs across the nation, you call that MLS number, listing number, or ML number. So for the purpose of the data dictionary, we have defined this as a listing ID. And the listing ID is the national standard name for what some of you commonly know as your MLS number. And so we've defined that as the actual standard name to be used nationwide, and then we provide a field definition for that name. So we have the standard name in the data dictionary, and then we have the actual definition of what that is. And for some of you that are more technical, we also define what type that is. So for a listing ID, in many markets, it's a number. In many other markets, it has letters in that. And so in doing so, we call that a string value that can be up to 255 characters long. And so within the data dictionary, we define the standard name, the field definition, its data type, as well as the suggested max length of that data. Now, there are other types of data, as for example, home warranty, yes, no. That is only a yes or no selection, so that's defined as a Boolean. And then items such as list price is going to be defined as an integer, because you would never have characters, hopefully, within your MLS data set that was actually of the list price. Now, for those fields that I mentioned earlier that are picked list values, those are multi-string lists because they have multiple items within that list once the agent's selected. So, Greg, if you could click on the, say, enumeration tab, you can see up here standard status is an enumeration string list. So the status itself is a list of values that the agent can select from. So you can see here we've defined the name of the field again, which was the standard status, and then the enumeration, which is the value an agent would actually pick. And these are the nationwide standards for this field. And Greg will talk about how that equates to when we go into certification. So you will see the standards that you're probably most comfortable with here listed, and hopefully these reflect your local market or very closely, such as active, pending, on hold, withdrawn, closed, expired, canceled, incomplete. And what is newer to the data dictionary is coming soon. Coming soon is an example of an expansion of the data dictionary to support market listings. Many MLSs in the past did not have a coming soon status. However, this is a trend in the nation overall, especially in those very hot markets with low days on market. And so that is put in here. And one mention to that, since we mentioned days on market, and this is often a question, we define the definition for days on market as to what it means. We do not define the MLS business rule of days on market and how that's calculated. So days on market is an integer value because it's a number, but we don't provide what the actual formula is because that's typically within the business rules of the local MLS. So I wanted to make sure we differentiate. We want to define the standard names, definitions, and how these are displayed and distributed, but it's up to you to define your local market business rules, and that is not an area where RESO works as it relates to standards. So in looking at this, yes, Rob, are you there?
Yeah, I finally made it on. My apologies.
Great. So Rob, I was about to go into the Data Dictionary Wiki and show the new format if you would like to go ahead and do some more talking here and take over from there.
Sure. Well, the idea behind the wiki was that I really wanted to start to move things into a fashion where currently the communication flows that we have for people being involved in the evolution of the dictionary sometimes is as simple as sending me an email. Also, folks that get their logins to Confluence can post things in there. And sometimes things are brought up on calls. And I really wanted to create a good centralized flow for people to participate and say, hey, you know what, I have this field, or you know, this definition maybe doesn't really cover all the bases that I think it should. And so by doing a wiki, and really I just looked at Wikipedia as the model, simply something that faces out to the public, that without much effort, folks can create an account and participate in what is the RESO dictionary. So the idea here is that in this familiar wiki environment, you can go look things up, you can scroll through them in a hierarchy, which we have over on the left-hand side, and then we're linking to things throughout the wiki. So for instance, right now as an example, we've got you on the property type, and to see what those lookups are, you don't have to go scroll through the hierarchy. you've got a link straight into the property type lookups. So if you want to jump into that. And then each lookup itself, so you've got the list of the enumerations that we have there. And then each enumeration itself, like residential, for example, if you want to go ahead and click on that, will take you in and give you the details of the residential enumeration underneath that field. So navigation should be something that most folks who've worked with Wikipedia or other wikis are familiar with. And then part of what you'll be able to do in here is to come in, and it is a work in progress right now, but we're making good strides for being ready this year, is that you'd be able to come in and really make your suggestions right into the actual line item. So if you were looking to add a new field to residential, then you would go up to the residential page and say, okay, here I want this field. Or say, for instance, you've got a particular enumeration, like you know, in the case where you're looking at residential or maybe land, and you see the definition there, and you think that that's not really robust enough to be able to make that suggestion straight into the wiki. And then we will have that go into a queue, and we will continue to have the RESO process, which is items come into a queue, they get reviewed to make sure that the concepts, the requests are complete, and something that the Data Dictionary Committee, you know, can actually evaluate. Then it will go into their list for the meeting agendas, and it will get reviewed by the group, approved or not. And if approved, then would go back and be put into essentially the draft version of the next version of the dictionary. So like today, 1.4 is approved, so that's no longer draft, that's finalized. We now have a draft of 1.5 that we're working on to continue with suggestions and improvements. So we would maintain that same concept of how we organize and approve things, with it finally going past the board of directors for their final approval of the overall package, which is what we do today. So that's the idea of the wiki. Would you like me to circle back on this, or I'm not sure what you had covered on it there, Jeremy?
I think I covered, I showed the spreadsheet, talked about the fields and enumerations, how were they defined. You may want to touch on the quote at the very top. I didn't touch on that, so I'll leave that up to you, and then you could probably go to the next slide for Greg.
Okay, sounds great. I spent a lot of time bouncing back and forth with different folks, trying to come up with a succinct way of describing what we're all on the hook for. You know, I run technology for an MLS myself, so I'm feeling the same pain as everyone else. And making sure that everyone understands the scope of your responsibilities is pretty important. And so I wanted a good catchphrase for us to work from. And this really does kind of encompass it. So if I say, you know, if you do it and the dictionary does it, it really is that commonality. So you might have something that you do that the dictionary doesn't do. That's fine. There's no problem there. You can go ahead and do the thing that you do your way. But if that thing that you're doing is, say, Windows, well, the dictionary does Windows. The dictionary has a Windows features field. So there's a case where you're doing it and the dictionary's doing it. So you need to do it the dictionary way. So in other words, out of your RETS interface, it needs to be properly called window features. It needs to have the same case, uppercase, lowercase needs to be the same. And you really need to pay attention to enumerations as they're coming along, because you will need to have your enumerations, those that match the dictionary, you will need to have yours match as well. Now, there might be things in the dictionary that it does and you don't do, and that's okay. You don't have to do anything that you don't already do. So say, for instance, you know, just to use, well, it might not be a good example, but Windows again, say you just don't have any mention of Windows in your MLS whatsoever, then don't add the Windows features field. It's quite pretty much that simple. Now, where the real use cases are going to be is probably not in Windows. Most people have Windows in their MLS pick list somewhere. But there are a lot of items that are in the dictionary that are used by some MLSs and not by others. We do try to keep the dictionary to where it's lean, so we don't have cases of super obscure stuff in there, but you should feel comfortable that if you see an item and you don't have anything like that in your MLS system, then don't worry about it. You don't have to do it. With Greg's testing, you'll be fine, and really that's the concept in a nutshell. So hopefully that helps you all. When we get to Q&A, please get in and chat if you have questions with respect to this particular concept, because it's really important. I've seen folks in data share scenarios just start adding fields to their MLS system when they didn't really need to, and they don't really have a use for them. And we want to avoid you going down that path. You just want to do what you need to do to be certified and still retain your local nature of things and how you do things. So that is that item, and I guess we're ready to move on to the next slide.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, my name is Greg Lemon, and regarding the data dictionary certification levels, at RISO, we understand that implementing the data dictionary into existing systems is a process that may require time. So our certification processes were made to allow for a gradual but steady adoption of the data dictionary. Today, what I'm going to be covering is a very high-level description of the certification process. As was mentioned earlier, there will be a third webinar on September 9th, Understanding Data Dictionary Certification, that I strongly encourage MLS managers, the data experts, and technologists to attend that webinar, but of course everybody's welcomed. And when we look at the certification, we have 5 levels. We have the core, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Within Data Dictionary 1.3, we only have core. But within Data Dictionary 1.4, we have all 5 levels that are available. And as Rob mentioned, nothing is required. There's no minimum fields or minimum resource requirements. So if you do it and the dictionary does it, just do it the dictionary way and we'll be fine. Each field is graded separately using multiple tests, and each field is then given a result level. If that specific field passes all the tests, it's compliant. If it fails important tests, then that field is in error and will prevent certification. But if the field fails some less important tests, it may be given either a warning or a notice. This is to allow an easy transition into certification without being overly draconian. Now, warnings do need to be fixed within 1 year of the certification date or the next time you apply for certification. Notices, they don't need to be fixed. That's just so that you know and people using your system know that there's a slight difference between your data and the data dictionary data. If you have any questions about the differences of that, feel free to enter into the box and we'll address that later on. Now, regarding core certification for 1.3 and 1.4, we're only looking at the 5 resources listed here. Even though the data dictionary has many resources defined, we're only looking at media, member, office, open house, and property. Now, all of the mapped core fields that you have within your system need to be error-free. Now, what that means to be error-free is it's either compliant, a warning, or a notice. So you are allowed to have some discrepancies within your fields or some issues that may need to be resolved in the future and still receive certification. Only the more difficult issues that cause errors will need to be fixed prior to receiving certification. And we have details of those that we can cover in our next webinar, but are also available at riso.org/certification. The bronze certification is nearly identical to the core certification. There's just more fields that have been defined as bronze. If you go through the RISO Data Dictionary 1.4, you'll notice there's a column there that classifies all of the fields as either core, bronze, silver, gold, or platinum. To be core, all of your core fields need to be compliant. To be bronze, you need to satisfy the core requirements, and all of the bronze fields that you use must be compliant as well. For bronze certification, we are ignoring the silver, gold, and platinum fields for testing purposes. But please, go ahead and map as many fields as possible, even though right now Data Dictionary 1.3 core is all that's required to satisfy any mandates that are currently out there. It's still possible to become a Data Dictionary 1.4 Platinum certified organization. So map everything you can, try to become as compliant as you can, and as the years march on, you'll be that farther ahead of the rising requirements of certification. And as we mentioned, there will be the third webinar on September 9th. Please sign up early and often, and we'll be able to go through this information in a lot more detail, including the process we go through for certification, to be able to talk about it at that time. And that's all I have. Rob?
Yeah, Greg, I just wanted at a high level before Rob jumps in here on this next slide about growth is we understand that as you implement the data dictionary, it is a large effort for yourself and for your MLS technology vendor. And so our goal is a 5-year plan to be able to grow the adoption of the data dictionary. We do not want to scare you with the word conversion, and that is not the intention of the data dictionary. The intention of the data dictionary and the way that we have mapped out certification levels is for you to be able to gradually grow your data set that would mimic the national data standards over a 5-year period. So we just want you to be aware that there is a core set of fields that are really important for the next year, and then we want to continue year after year increasing that level of adoption without you having to do what many would consider a conversion. So we really want you to support the data dictionary and allow your market to grow with this implementation of the data dictionary similar to other markets across the United States, so that in 5 years we are not talking about 166 fields that are core. We're talking about a very large set of fields and underlying values that look the same across 770 MLSs, and that is the overall goal here with the different levels, is to try to ease the burden on you and your MLS technology vendor, but continue elevating so we do get to a national data standard that can ease the technology vendors and agents and brokers' lives as well as the MLSs. Thank you, Greg. Go ahead, Rob, to the next slide on Data Dictionary 1.5.
You know, just to kind of comment on that, it's for everybody, I think it's probably a good idea to grab a copy of the dictionary and read the introduction page on there. My attempts with that page is try to clarify kind of what some of the goals are. And you know, the mandate that you have is to have data dictionary compliance out of your RET server, which I'm sure you've heard. Some folks might confuse this with their listing input form in their MLS system. You might have a vendor say you need to do that. You don't. Technologically, your information can be transformed and then printed out, sent out a RETS interface in a compliant fashion when your input form might not be what someone would consider compliant or not. But compliance isn't tested at the input form. Now, one of the benefits of going ahead and changing your MLS system's input form is that what you're sending out your RETS interface matches your input form, and as a result, your input form and your reports in your MLS in turn match the way things are going to start showing up out there on the internet. So whether it's IDX or it's some utility that your members use, it would create a continuity to do that, but it's important to know that is entirely optional. You don't have to change your input form in order to achieve compliance. So if that's an area that you have some confusion, by all means, be sure to ask. If we don't get it to it today, and this offer goes out to everybody, you know, we're very accessible from a question and answer standpoint. So at a later date, if you have any questions, if you want to get on the phone to discuss things to make sure you understand what you need to do here, by all means, just feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to hop on the phone most any time. Moving on to what we have here is looking forward. You know, we started off with a pretty good collection of MLSs. There were a lot of us sitting in a room. I think it was about 23 MLSs in the beginning, and that's definitely expanded. You know, we now have all sorts from vendors that are both receiving data and vendors who are creating MLS systems and other systems that might have listing input or information input, because we're not restricted to just listings either inside the dictionary. We have contacts, we have the latest thing is to add a structure for sharing team information, because we know that you might have members that find a product out there that has a team ability to that and they want to use it. So by having this standardized, we're facilitating these things. And so it's not just growing your property / listing information, it's growing in every dimension that your members might be creating data is where our interests are at. And having you participate at these levels is really important. You know, we all wind up with work to do with this. It's not easy. I can see that the benefits are great with this. The ability for product vendors to create things that my members are going to benefit by and they're going to be happier and be able to do their jobs better is the #1 reason why I think I'm here, is to facilitate my membership. So by getting involved, you know, you don't have to simply say, oh, there's that big dictionary telling me what to do. You know, at the end of the day, participation and how effective you can be in the data dictionary work group is literally as effective as you want to be. You know, with any kind of work groups, you have a certain number of people that are very active, and you have a certain number of people that sit back and listen, and then you have a certain number of people that never show up. And we would love to have you be one of those active people, because everybody has things that are unique in their system, and being able to come forward and work with the group and see how you can make this dictionary work for you, I think is a really important part of the future for yourselves. You know, that's one of the biggest benefits when asked, you know, what's the benefit of being a member, is that you can represent who you are and what your MLS system is all about. So to get started, dive in and get those fields mapped. It's not necessarily an easy process, but it's not as hard as you would think, especially if you just go after, say, residential. Don't worry about the enumerations at first. Just go after the residential fields, and that'll give you a perspective that really will kind of waken you up to, hey, look, we're this far off, and hey, look at these things we have here that don't map up, you know, and they're really popular fields with our members. We need to find a place for these. And so by getting in and participating in the dictionary work group, you can start to work those situations, and instead of just having to change what you have, you can, you know, really influence what's going on with the dictionary and become part of it. So what we've got coming up next with our focus currently is we're starting to enumerate silver. So as you look into the dictionary, you will see that we have those multi-single select fields. And they are the ones that over on the enumeration tab have values. And so far we've got the core and the bronze done. And so silver's coming up, and then we're going to be moving on to gold and on to platinum. And as you start getting higher up the chain, you start getting into more and more of the features, and a lot of those might actually be pretty important to you. So being able to get in early before we've even enumerated a field like, say, your Windows features, you could potentially have a great influence on what goes into that pick list. So please do dive in. Efficiency data. You may have heard about everything that's going on in the world of greening the home, greening buildings, and all that good stuff. The government's put a lot of money into this effort. The Department of Energy is heading up an initiative called the Accelerator Program, which is the latest good positive thing. And what we're looking to do is trying to get this information available to our membership. You know, you may have thought, well, how are my realtor members going to go out and evaluate what type of insulation is in a home? And that's a difficult question. You know, there's a lot of my members that would never be interested in trying to do that. But if we can make that data available, and just like tax data, I think we can really change the equation on showing the value that comes with a home. Because at the end of the day, when someone goes and purchases a really efficient home, they make the effort, they see what the value is, and things sell at a pretty good valued rate, but they rarely appraise at it. And getting those comps in the MLS is really going to make a big difference as far as lending and as far as people being aware that, hey, this comp has these, you know, it has this solar, or it has this insulation, it has these types of windows. And that value being really prevalent to make that comp make sense in the MLS is something that we think is going to be huge. So any interest you have in there, please chime in. You can follow up with us afterwards if you want to get involved in greening, finding out how to green your MLS. There is a greenthemls.org site that has got some pretty good instructions. They tie together with the RISO dictionary very well, and with the initiative going on with the Department of Energy. So that's that piece. IDX. We were at the RISO meeting in the spring, and we had a question come out from the brokers saying IDX is awful for us. Every MLS we go to, IDX is totally different. So we thought, well, you know what? Inside of the dictionary, there's a column for payload. It currently doesn't have anything in it, but the idea is to say whether or not a field is commonly part of a particular group of fields. IDX is one such group. IDX would never have like selling office compensation, but IDX would have something like window features. IDX wouldn't have something like the lack of a, let's see, dual variable rate of commission. IDX typically wouldn't have that. So it's going through these fields and saying, what is IDX to me, is a good way for you to have a say on what the IDX, standardized IDX set of fields should be. And we're actively doing that right now. So here's a way that you can participate today. Get into RISO, get your fields mapped up, go through the dictionary, pick out what you think should be IDX, and send it on in. So if you want to participate in that, please let us know. We can get you set up with I have a spreadsheet that's a template so that you can go through and say what you feel should be IDX and what isn't. So that's that particular place. Other things we're doing is you know, getting ourselves worked in with the wiki. It's a total change from a spreadsheet on how we work, but the wiki will export back out to a spreadsheet for those who need it for doing things like mapping. But getting that wiki done and out the door is another thing we're working on. So by participating, you can potentially dive in and say, hey, you know what, I think this should be this way, or we should have this information inside the wiki. And then also in the technical subgroup, so if you have developers or any folks that are much more on the technology side, the RISO Dictionary has a subgroup of technologists, and get them involved. We're working on save search and how that information might be transmitted. So that is the end of my list. And
okay, thank you, Rob. I'll go ahead and jump in and be really quick to say how can you get involved, and Rob gave us a lot of great examples. Data Dictionary is just one of our work groups, but it is one of the highest visible work groups in the industry as it relates to all of the constituents we deal with today with brokers, agents, vendors, and MLSs. So we would really encourage everyone to join RISO as a member so we can make sure your local market specifics are put into RISO standards such as the Data Dictionary first and foremost. So we would love to have you join RISO as a member and get into the work groups and participate and provide your input of your local markets for helping with that. And as Greg mentioned, we will be having a certification webinar, and it is the MLS's responsibility to do the certification, as Danae so eloquently told everyone at the beginning. It's very important that you take the action to make sure that you're certified and work with your vendors to do that, as well as supporting RISO efforts through your local, state, and national involvements with policy and technology. And we have a fall conference at the end of October in Austin. We would love for you to attend as well. I want to jump into the Q&A because we do have some great Q&A. So let's go ahead and answer some of the questions. I've fielded some of the questions directly, but just to remind everyone, the webinar will be recorded, and we will make sure there's a link online, and we will email that to all of the registered participants for the webinar. So to field some of the great questions we have, there's a question came in that says, does this mean that we need to change our data forms to show the new field names from the Data Dictionary? No, it does not mean that you need to do that. As you work with your MLS vendor, you need to provide a data feed that is compliant with the Data Dictionary, but you can retain your current listing input forms as well as your current MLS data structure, as long as that will work and also allow you to provide a Data Dictionary-based data feed out from your MLS, and that's what we would, as RISO, certify on you. It would be ideal long-term that everyone has a similar listing input form so that the agents use the same language as the consumers. So as you have a Data Dictionary feed that goes out to consumer websites, you may have some inconsistencies with how the agent inputs that data into your own MLS, and there may be some conversations to where the agent consumer would love to be able to speak the same language from listing input all the way through a website display and everywhere in between on the real estate transaction. But it is not a requirement to change your listing input forms or your actual MLS system necessarily, and I would encourage everyone to work with their vendors on those specific details. The Data Dictionary Wiki, as Rob mentioned, it will be for public access. So the readability of the Data Dictionary Wiki, this will be public. Today, the spreadsheets for Data Dictionary 1.3 and 1.4 are located on RISO.org. Those are public. Those are free to download. As I mentioned, RISO standards are free. If you would like access to the Data Dictionary Wiki when it is launched, we are still roughly a month to 6 weeks away from launching that to be available for the entire public. But as soon as we do, you will be able to access that publicly. Members will have an additional level of access into the Data Dictionary Wiki, along with other areas of RISO, where you can actually ask these questions in discussion forums with your peers as well as your constituents and other customers and technical experts. So one of the value propositions of membership within RISO is you don't get just a read-only view of the Data Dictionary. You get a full network of industry experts and the ability to contribute and actually ask questions and can participate in discussion forums and so forth. There's a question, how do we log into the Rezo Wiki? As soon as the Rezo Wiki is available in the next 4 to 6 weeks, we will post on Rezo.com under Data Dictionary and the home page how to log in to that. And we'll work with CMLS to make sure that we do some targeted communications out to the industry to both CMLS members, Rezo members, and non-members for the contacts that we have available and provide you access instructions on how to do that. We have a question here that I'm not very technical, so I need a simple step-by-step guide as to what I need to do to be compliant by the end of the year, and should I apply for certification 1.3 or 1.4 and why. So the first step I would ask of you is to contact your local MLS vendor and ask them for the status and the method of which they're going to help you implement the Data Dictionary Wiki. On Rezo.org, we have a website that's dedicated to Data Dictionary certification. We have asked for specific messaging to be provided from all of the MLS vendors to help guide you into how they're going to help you along with this process. The large MLS vendors have been very supportive in doing so. So the first step I would ask would be to talk to your MLS vendor and work with them on how to get involved. In addition, there's a Data Dictionary starter kit. The starter kit starts at the business level but does get technical into mapping your fields into the Data Dictionary field set. I would take a look at the starter kit, read the first few pages, but please don't be overwhelmed by the wealth of information there, because some of the worksheets that are contained within that starter kit may not apply to you based upon the solution your MLS vendor is going to give you to implement the Data Dictionary. There's a question that says, what do we mean when we say map a field? Mapping a field would be that you have a field in your local MLS that does not conform in some manner to the Data Dictionary. So you need to translate that field which you have on your listing input form and how it exists there as to how it is defined in the Data Dictionary. So when we use the term map a field, what we're actually doing is a language translation. We're translating how you store bathrooms and how the Data Dictionary defines how bathrooms should be stored, and you would map the translation between those fields. Great question. We have a question here, in which property type will we place aka condo and multifamily? So within the Data Dictionary spreadsheet, you will say, and you do have horizontal property type regimes, aka condo and multifamily. So there are different property types within the Data Dictionary, and there are also different ownership types and property styles and definitions surrounding those. So if we're looking at condo as actually a property style, then that could be within the property style of the residential property type. If you're looking at multifamily, typically that is a residential income property type. So there's a specific property class to encompass multifamily, what many people consider to be 1 to 4 unit, and sometimes is termed residential income. So there is a property class devoted just to that within the Data Dictionary.
Jeremy,
question is, yes, go ahead, Rob.
To chime in on that, this, classes and resources gets a little bit technical.
Yes.
And, definitely getting your tech folks involved in that discussion. Another way you can look at it in the dictionary, though, is that there is a property type and a property subtype fields and enumerations in there. And those define those pretty well. So your residential income, which has a synonym of multifamily, you'll find that in there, and you'll find that definition. You'll also find condominium, townhouse, and all those things. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Rob. How do we get a copy of the current 1.3 or 1.4 Data Dictionary spreadsheet without joining Rezo? Simply go to Rezo.org. At the bottom of the home page, you'll see a link to download the Data Dictionary 1.3 or the Data Dictionary 1.4 spreadsheet. There was a question, do you implement Data Dictionary 1.3 or 1.4 at this point? That's a great question, and I would advise you to discuss that with your vendor. Some of the large MLS vendors are going to implement Data Dictionary version 1.4. So for example, it's my current understanding that if your MLS vendor is Black Knight Financial Services, they're jumping right into the Data Dictionary 1.4. RISO will allow active certifications on the last two revisions. So as long as you implement 1.3 or 1.4 and certify against one of those two versions, then you can satisfy the NAR mandate that you are certified for the Data Dictionary. As you move into next year, if you certified on 1.3 this year and the board ratifies 1.5, next year you would need to elevate yourself to adopt 1.4, 1.5 to make sure you keep your annual certification active on the latest two versions. We have a great question here regarding pick list fields. Will the Data Dictionary define proper options such as exterior equals brick and stone separated versus brick and stone as a combined option? It's a great question, and this is where Rob and his work group that he chairs needs your input. And so I would encourage you to take a look at the Data Dictionary 1.4, as this is the type of input we need for future growth. You will see some fields combined, and you will see some fields separated. My personal view is my house is brick, and that is distinctly different than a stone house, so I would imagine a proper input would be to separate those two. But this is where we need your local market industry expert, because you will have certain fields that you define in a separated manner as pick list values, and that you would like to see those reflected correctly in the Data Dictionary version 1.5 and beyond. We really need your input for the work group to be able to make sure we have the proper definitions across the nation. And that was the last question that I have today through the field. There's one more repeat question, which was, do non-members have access to the wiki? You will have access to the wiki. It's going to be another 4 to 6 weeks before it's publicly available, but we will be providing access to the wiki for all RISO non-members to see, just as they can download the spreadsheets for 1.3 and 1.4 publicly available. And I know we're wrapping up into 12 o'clock, and I want to let everyone know that needs to go. Since we're at the 12 o'clock mark, I want to thank you for the participation, but we are going to stay here online to field a few more questions. So I really do appreciate your involvement with the webinar. I'd like to encourage you, if you are departing, to be involved with RISO, contribute to the standards so we can make sure we're making standards that will help benefit your local market areas, and also encourage you to be involved with the Council of MLS, as these are partnerships that we have that are very dear to us with RISO, and Council of MLS has a great presence in the industry and a great membership program as well, and they also have some great MLS best practices that I would encourage you to take a look at as well. So thank you all, and again, I wanted to follow up with a couple of more questions that are here. There is a question that they asked their SSM, their support manager at Black Knight, about the implementation certification, and he was not aware of the details for this. On RISO.org, there is a page specifically that has a message from Black Knight, but if your SSM is not aware, if you could email me directly, I will put you in contact with the correct Black Knight individuals that can help answer your question. So if you would just email me at jeremy@riso.org, I will make sure to coordinate getting you in touch with someone at Black Knight that can give you their specific timelines for implementation of that. There's a question about what is the cost of membership. Membership is based on the size of your organization, as an organization is a member with RISO, so all of their employees can participate within RISO standards. So if you go to riso.org/join, you will find the fee schedule based upon your size of multiple listing service and association. I will reiterate, though, that for smaller organizations under 2,000 members within their MLS, the annual fee is $500 to join REZO. So you get all of the REZO benefits, and all of your employees can participate from your organization within REZO fully for $500 a year. There is a certification fee, which we will go more detail in the certification webinar. For members, the certification fee is $150. For non-members, the certification fee is $750. So if you're in an MLS that's under 2,000 members, it will be cheaper for you to be a member of REZO and certify than to certify for the NAR mandate as a non-REZO member. That is set up that we want your local market input, and we value that. So financially, we value your input and your participation. So for anyone under 2,000 members, it will be cheaper to join REZO and then apply for certification as opposed to applying for certification alone separately. That's a great question. Someone asked again, I will reiterate, it will be recorded and will be sent out to everyone. Great question. I would like to get involved in the work group. What do I need to do to be on the work group? The first thing is you do need to be a REZO member to get on the work group. And as soon as you're a REZO member, if you will just email info@rezo.org, we will get you connected into the work group. And I know Rob would love to have your input from more market areas as he grows the 1.5 and beyond versions of the dictionary. So if you'll be a member of REZO and email info@rezo.org, we'll make sure that we get you set up with the work group and let you know all the details. They meet virtually and they meet on a monthly basis typically, and that is typical of all the work groups within REZO, not just the data dictionary. Participating in the work groups is free to all members. Non-members are allowed to submit business cases to us directly, and we will push those into the work group. But based upon being an intellectual open source company, we do have to have an agreement of the intellectual property that you contribute to the open standards, that it will be used for the open standards, and hence the typical requirement of membership to join a work group. We have some more great questions coming in. Will all the questions be added to FAQ worksheet that will be accessible to everyone? What we can do, we will be reading these and recording these and posting the responses, but we will work with the Council of MLS to see if we can put an FAQ page up with the answers between today's webinar, the webinar in 3 weeks, and the webinar we had 3 weeks ago. Okay, great question. My MLS chair would like to know how this will affect the front end or how agents will see and input the data. Again, it's up to you to change your listing input forms and how agents enter that data into the MLS. It would be most ideal to have that consistent with the data dictionary. However, that's a much larger effort. And so for the first step would be to be able to distribute your MLS data in a compliant data dictionary manner, so that when it goes out to the hundreds of destinations where you send MLS data for brokers and agents and their products, such as broker back office systems and websites, they all receive the data in a common manner. You will still have the differences then of how they input the data, but it is the long-term strategic vision that one day the agents will enter in the data in the similar manner as the data is sent out and displayed on multiple products and websites, etc. So should an MLS start comparing their MLS field names with the data dictionary, or does the MLS vendor do that with the solution they provide to the MLS? This is an MLS vendor specific question, and what I can tell you for Black Knight Financial Services and for CoreLogic, if those are your MLS vendors as well, or those two vendors will be helping extensively map your data, translate that into being able to provide a data dictionary-based feed. So in doing so, they are doing a lot of the spreadsheet comparisons for you. For FBS customers that use Flex MLS, a similar thing applies. Out of the core fields, I believe they've mapped for most of their customers roughly 120 of the 166 core fields. They still need your help to finish your local implementation of the remaining 40, 45 fields that you have that are existent in the core set of fields. So I would request that you contact your local MLS vendor first to see where they are with translating your MLS data into a compliant data dictionary manner, and see where you can help to make sure that translation is correct, because you are your local expert. All the MLS vendors are phenomenal, but they don't know your local market as well as you do, and so there could be some errors in translation, and you want to make sure that when they're doing those translations for you, you want to be involved where it makes sense to do so.
Just to chime in on that, to make sure everybody's clear, the dictionary certification is an MLS certification. It's not really a vendor certification. Now, a lot of vendors are diving in and helping, and it's really important part of how things are getting done. But it's important that you take the time and go through and take a look at those fields, because you as an MLS are certifying. So making sure that you don't have some bad mapping, to use that mapping term. In other words, you might have a window feature. You know, the example we love is jealousy windows versus louver windows. They're basically the same thing. And making sure that, you know, that's getting correctly represented out your RETS interface, because that's what's going to show up on all those other sites, whether you're talking Realtor.com or you're talking about some utility that your members might use, like a listing book or a top producer. So get involved, have a look, ask questions if you need help. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. There's a question, is the $500 membership fee annual or one-time fee? That is an annual subscription fee. So that goes from, we do a calendar subscription for that, and then the full fee when you join, and we prorate the renewal for you. So you're on a calendar membership subscription with Rezo. So the $500 fee is an annual membership fee into Rezo. There is a question, if our software vendor ensures that we are compliant meeting the standards, do we have to be certified or be a member? You have to be certified by the NAR mandate. The NAR mandate applies to realtor-owned and operated multiple listing services. The NAR policy does not apply to technology vendors. Therefore, each individual MLS must apply for certification. Do you have to be a member? No, you do not have to be a member to apply for certification, but we encourage membership because we encourage bringing your input to see if we can put details into the standards that help your local business needs and the pain points that you have with your customers on data integration and so forth. So again, it is, as Rob iterated as well, the MLS does have to apply for certification, and you can go to rezo.org and do that online. That was the last question we have, so I'll wait a couple more minutes if there's any other questions, but we will make sure to post this webinar out to everyone in a recorded fashion and distribute the link so you can take a look at it again. And please feel free to contact us. My email and my cell phone is on the screen. info@rezo.org is to all of our staff, and if there are any specific certification questions that you have regarding Data Dictionary or any other certification process, then certification@rezo.org, and Greg is the primary individual that fields those questions as well. So if you take a look and take a step back and you have any questions whatsoever after the webinar ends, please let us know. We'll be glad to help field those questions. And if there are vendor-specific questions that you have, then we will make sure that we work with you and your vendor to make sure you get in touch with someone that you can answer those questions when it's regarding your MLS technology vendor. We have 3 more questions that have come in. What are the consequences of not being compliant, not just by the deadline, but in general? This is an NAR policy mandate, so the consequences are in line with any other NAR policy mandate that you do not comply with. It's my understanding, and this is a conversation you would want to have with NAR, but NAR typically holds E&O insurance for those that comply with the NAR MLS policy handbook. For those that do not comply, they are subject through NAR's rules and processes and procedures, they are subject to potentially losing the E&O insurance which NAR provides. I am not sure if an association charter would be part of this as far as the MLS policy compliance, but I would want you to direct those questions over more so to the NAR MLS policy committee, and they can tell you the ramifications for doing that. I would encourage, though, that this is not something we are doing from a revenue stance. This is not something that is being done just from a policy stance, but this is something that has come about because of the industry pain points. So not complying does have ramifications with NAR, and it also will have ramifications from your constituents. You may hear feedback from your brokers and your agents and the vendors which receive data from you. If they cannot do that next year in a compliant manner, you may have other ramifications outside of the NAR policy. And that was actually handling 2 questions. And then, can a non-board owned MLS get certified? Absolutely. We will certify any MLS against the data dictionary, and you do not have to be realtor owned or affiliated. We will certify you outside of that, and there are many which are not realtor owned or affiliated that will probably go through certification because they want the benefits to the brokers and the agents and the technology vendors that comes with certification outside of the NAR policy mandate. Okay, and that is the last question I have today, so I would like to go ahead and wrap it up. And again, thank everyone. I'd like to thank Danae for helping host this, and the WAVE group as well, who's been a great facilitator with the webinar. And I'd like to thank Rob Larson as well as Greg Lemon, who participated with us today. And I hope everyone will join us on September the 9th at the same time for the 3rd of the series and the final, which will be data dictionary certification, and we'll be walking you through more specifically how you go about applying for certification and the steps to get you from where you are today to get you certified in that process. I want to thank again everyone, and we hope that you will be more involved with REZO, and please contact us if you have any questions whatsoever about membership, certification, or participating in the work group. Thank you, everyone.